Okay. So, hello to all. First, let me introduce myself. I'm Marc-André, a coordinator at the Swiss-Canadian Chamber of Commerce here in Quebec. I would like to thank you all for being here in such large numbers. As the president of the Chamber, Vincent Galland could not be here today. I will be pleased to introduce today's event. The theme of today's event is establishing a business presence in Canada or Switzerland, the best options and key success factors. I would also like to thank our guest panel, consisting of the law firm HFW, the law firm Lette and associés, the Swiss Business Hub of Canada, and Montreal International. The event will take place as follows. So first of all, Mr. Georges Racine, partner at HFW's Geneva office, will talk about establishing a business in Switzerland and entering into joint venture agreements with Swiss entities, entering into agency and distribution agreements to sell Canadian products on the Swiss market. Then, Ms. Monica Schirdevan, lawyer at Lette Associés here in Canada, will speak to us about establishing a business in Canada as a gateway to the North American market and entering into agency and distribution agreements. Afterwards, we will have a panel discussion with Mr. Georges Racine from HFW, Ms. Monica Schirdevan from Lette Associés, Mr. Eros Robiani from the Swiss Business Hub of Canada, Nicole Jauvin from Montreal International, and the conversation will be moderated by Ms. Anne Guimont-Kostecki, Vice President at the Swiss-Canadian Chamber of Commerce in Geneva. After that, we will end this event with a question session conducted in both languages. So if you don't have any questions so far, I now give the floor to Mr. Georges Racine. So thank you very much.
Good, am I on? Hi, welcome everyone. Good evening if you are in Europe, and I guess good day if you are in Canada. Very pleased to be invited to speak with you about investing in Switzerland and Canada. Obviously, as I'm sitting in Geneva, you can see from the picture here on the screen, I will discuss, I guess, inward investment in Switzerland, and Monica will look at investment in Canada. That said, I am a Canadian and Swiss citizen, and I've practiced in Canada, Quebec, Montreal, and Geneva. I've been in Geneva for 15 years or so, in fact, more than 15 years. So I'm pretty well positioned to compare between the two systems and give you personal, I suppose, advice and my feeling, or I guess my experience of the two jurisdictions. I've also practiced in London for 8 years, actually, for Canadian law firms. And I'm just saying this because it allows me, again, to compare jurisdictions and systems and see what's easy, what's not, and compare notes. Now, I would say this, of course, it's a very broad topic. I only have a few minutes to introduce it as regards Switzerland. What I would say is that, I suppose, setting up business in Switzerland, or generally dealing with Switzerland, is a bliss compared to dealing with many other jurisdictions. I've worked in Africa, in Asia, in the Middle East, and so on. Language-wise, geography-wise, culture-wise, legal system-wise, it can be very different, much more complicated than dealing in Switzerland. As you all know, Switzerland is a sophisticated jurisdiction. It's stable economically and politically speaking. There's a high quality of life. The infrastructure is superb. Just think of the rail system in the country. There are 4 official languages, including French, not English, but then most people speak English in any event, so it's not a big deal. The cost of living is high, but then the services and the quality of government services is very high. If you call it administration, for instance, be it at the federal, cantonal, or communal level, normally people will answer, which is not a given in every country. The country tops ranking for innovation and competitiveness. It's done so for many years. The country is a civil law jurisdiction, so unlike some of the common law provinces, of course, in Canada, you guys will not have a civil code. In this case, we have a civil code. Now, the nice thing is, despite the 26 cantons in this country, there's not 26 different legal systems. There's only one legal system. So the same civil code or code of obligations applies throughout the country. It's only one system. There's an FTA, free trade agreement between Canada and Switzerland through EFTA, the European Free Trade Association, as you may know. The courts are mature. It's a great hub for arbitration, as you may know. And both countries are members of the New York Convention on the Recognition and Enforcement of Foreign Arbitral Awards. The countries share the same values, generally speaking. We have the same federal structures, so federal government, cantonal governments, if I may say, which replace the provincial governments in Canada, and then the communal governments, which are more or less like municipalities in Canada, to simplify things. Now, in terms of business organizations, the types thereof, you don't need to set up shop in this country to deal with this country. Obviously, you can export to this country. The country will gladly import your goods if you have stuff to sell through mere export sales. And of course, you can also set agency and distribution agreements just to go a bit deeper in the relationship. One thing you should know is that in this country, commercial agency is a regulated or nominate contract under the Civil Code, which it isn't, for instance, in Quebec. So there's a chapter dealing specifically with agency agreements, which they distinguish from simple agency, which we would call mandat in French, in Quebec at least. I'm not sure who's from other provinces in Canada right now on the screen, but anyways, Quebecers will know about that. Distribution agreements, on the other hand, are innominate contracts. They are not regulated in the Civil Code. Hence, you can pretty much tailor them the way you want them, basically. It's freedom of contract. Franchises exist. If you want to buy a franchise, a McDonald's franchise or whatever in this country, you can do that. You can open a branch, i.e. not form a company in this country, but simply open a branch, which would be like a case of business of your Canadian entity. And then if you want to go deeper, you can do JV, joint ventures. Now, JVs can be either contractual, i.e. not incorporated, or incorporated. That means you can invest in a business in Switzerland with co-shareholders, be they Swiss or Canadian or foreign or Russian. Well, Russian is probably more difficult nowadays, but you can still do that. And then you can form a company in this country, obviously, as you can do in Canada. Now, in this country, you can register your company in one of the 26 different cantons. If you do that, your company can deal anywhere in Switzerland. It doesn't have to be registered in one particular canton if you want to deal in that canton, or if you want to deal with other cantons. I mean, you can just deal anywhere with any canton, any company incorporated in any canton. There are two types, basically, of companies: the SA, which corresponds to a normal provincial company or Canadian corporation, and the SIRL, which is somewhat between a general partnership and a corporation. There's a few differences, subtleties. In this country, you cannot have an unlimited capital as you do in Canada, which is a bit of a shame, but they are working at changing this in the current company law reform going on, which hopefully will come to force in 2023 or soon after. You must go before a notary to incorporate, not just do this by calling the company's register and getting it done over the phone almost. In Quebec, it's so easy. You must go before a notary, have things authenticated and so on. People must sign in front of him, depose their signatures and so on. Also, you must open a bank account before incorporating a company in this country. And that's where things tend to drag, because often people will have the intentions to go very quickly and want to do things fast, but opening the bank account will be the big thing, because the banks nowadays will ask for KYC, and KYC, depending on who you are, the history you have, the nationality, where you're from, and so on, can be way more complicated. But once this is done, forming a company is fairly easy. On the companies, again, differences. Shares here have par value still, nominal values. They don't anymore, at least in Quebec. I'm not sure about Ontario. I suppose they don't either in other provinces. So that's a bit of a drag, but then if you issue for more than the par value, you simply issue at the premium. There's ways to deal with this corporate-wise and tax-wise. It's no big deal. Companies have legal personalities. Liability, of course, is limited to, to the assets of the company. That is, there's a corporate veil. And you must, in the case of an SA, deposit 100,000 CHF in capital. In the case of an SIRL, it's 20,000. It's cheaper. But then if you want to really go for the best vehicle in this country, you should really go for an SA, which has shares as opposed to parts sociales. What else? In the case of an SA, the shareholders are not known. They're not disclosed to the public. In some cases, you want that for confidentiality reasons. In the case of an SIRL, the shareholders will be disclosed. Not a big deal, but in some cases, it can make a difference. So again, just a quick wrap up. It's already what I've already passed my hour. Yeah, 1812. I only had 10 minutes to deal with this, but it's a first introduction. Very easy to deal with this country. Got to be organized, but again, it's a bliss compared to other jurisdictions I've been in.
Now it's Monica's turn.
All right, thank you. I was allowed to be unmuted. So it's a pleasure being here. Thank you so much for the invitation, and thank you, Josh, for your insight. I'll be bouncing off several things that you've said to compare what you've said about Switzerland to the Canadian system. So just a quick introduction. I'm Monica Schurdevan, lawyer with Lette and Associés, and we work a lot with Swiss investors who come to Canada to establish a business here, to start their operations here, whether by establishing a subsidiary or by selling their products or services on the Canadian market. Like Switzerland as well, Canada is a modern country. It's open for business, open for foreign investment. And generally speaking, the legal system will reflect that willingness to attract foreign investment. And we'll be seeing that a little bit now in the next few minutes, particularly in corporate law and in commercial contract law. So when a Swiss company comes to Canada, the first two questions it will ask is, first of all, where and how? So as George has mentioned, for Switzerland to be relatively centralized, Canada is on the opposite, rather decentralized. So a lot of the regulation and the laws and the jurisdiction is in the hands of the provinces. So it's important to establish in a first step where you'll be going. Once you've established which province you'll be doing business in, the question is what you'll be doing, how you'll set up your business. And the options are very similar to those that Georges has mentioned for Switzerland. So for example, working with agents or distributors, or establishing your own company, entering into a joint venture or franchise or license agreements. A very common way of entering the Canadian market is to establish your own subsidiary. As Josh had said, that it is very simple in Switzerland. It is also very simple in Quebec and in Canada generally. A big difference maybe from what we've heard is the capital. The minimum capital for an incorporation in Canada is a symbolic $1. So no need to invest 100,000 Swiss francs or 20,000 Swiss francs. You can start with a nominal dollar. And the beauty of that is that nobody will know, because that is usually the next question. If we invest only with a nominal dollar, do we look serious? Can we do business? Will our partners even look at us as potential partners? The answer is yes, because Canada's system is set up to allow foreign investment or any investment to start off very quickly. You can start your company very quickly. You can start doing business. And as you grow, you can invest more, you can grow more, and then you can really take the time to build it up financially and business-wise. So the usual form is an incorporation. We have several names for the same structure. Sometimes that can lead to confusion. So it is a company, a corporation, an incorporated, an Inc., a corp. It's all relating to the same structure, which is a company or corporation which has shares, at least one share, And the share can be held by a foreign investor, a person, or a legal entity. And that shareholder will then name the board of directors, and the board of directors will then name the officers. In Canada, there's the possibility of choosing provincial law to incorporate or federal law. From one province to the next, and from between the federal level and the provincial level, the corporate laws are all very modern, all very similar, and there are, however, some distinctions which will make some jurisdictions more interesting to foreign investment. For example, one distinction is that in several provinces, for example, in Quebec, where I'm based, there is absolutely no requirement for the board of directors to have Canadian resident directors. This means practically that as a Swiss company, you can come into Canada, incorporate a provincial company, be the sole shareholder, be the sole director, or have in any event directors which are based in Switzerland or other countries who will then name the officers. So it's a very simple, straightforward structure that you can control out of Switzerland. The incorporation process, George has already touched on it, and it is true. Sometimes it seems too good to be true, but it is the way it is. It's very simple to incorporate. Everything is done virtually, online, electronically, and that has been also such an advantage during the pandemic, during the last 2 years, where our clients who were not able to come in from Switzerland to come in for a business trip were nonetheless able to incorporate and set up their business here and to control things out of other countries such as Switzerland. Just to give you an overview, the usual process is that we get our instructions virtually, electronically. We do a name search to make sure that the proposed name will meet the local requirements. And once we have that, which takes maybe 1 or 2 days, and once we have all the complete instructions, we file the articles of association, of incorporation, with the registrar electronically as well. And we get the certificate of incorporation electronically within the same day or in the next few days. So there's no need to go in person to a notary to get any certified documentation. And so the whole setup is very quick and very fast, and therefore also often a first way of entering the market, because even though it's a simple structure, you are still protected from personal liability to a significant extent. And so there is usually not really any downside from incorporating your own subsidiary here in Canada, in Quebec specifically. The other options as well are, as Joss has touched on as well, are the agency and distribution channels. And these, of course, can be combined. So as a Swiss company, you can say, well, the incorporation process sounds very good. It sounds very simple and straightforward, but I'm not ready for it just yet. However, I would like to have a market entry to test out the market. Is there an interest for my product, for my services? After my first client, will I get more clients? How will I build up the business? And so some clients will decide that their first step is not to incorporate, but rather to work with local agents or distributors. Unlike Swiss law, agency contracts are not regulated specifically, and distribution networks are regulated by the usual sale and purchase regulations. This means that the parties become the legislator in the sense that they will make the law between themselves. So sometimes that we have the reaction of our clients from Switzerland who say, please don't make a long contract, just a few pages. We saw a long contract, it was 10 pages, just keep it short and simple. And then we'll kind of come back and say, well, actually 10 pages is already very short for us. So that's the first step. And to explain that although it seems complex to maybe set up very long and detailed contracts, the advantage is that you are able to a very great extent to determine what rules will be regulating your business relationship with your local agent or distributor or other business partners. And so you can look at what your expectations are. And as usually at the beginning, the relationship is positive, it's going well. So it really gives you the chance to negotiate your expectations, to set out also certain things which will be important along the lines. Are you expecting certain minimum sales? What are you expecting for the future? What do you expect if you want to exit the relationship? And what happens if your agent or distributor wants to exit the relationship? Also, a very important part of the discussion will be what happens if you do decide one day to start your own incorporation and to start your own business activities locally. What happens to your agent, to your distributor? So these are all things which you can discuss, that you can negotiate, and it is not badly perceived. It's not perceived as a lack of trust or confidence in your business partner. It's really part of the process of setting up a serious legal relationship, which you can really, really regulate and determine at the very beginning. So it's a broad overview of the possibilities of entering the Canadian market. And we'll have a chance to go into more detail and answer your questions in the panel discussion and also in the Q&A. Thank you.
Thanks a lot, Monica. So yeah, it's time for the panel discussion now.
Thank you, Marc-André. I think I have the mic, yes. Could you please unmute also Monica and George? So thanks. So I'm Anne Guimont-Kostecki from the Swiss Canadian Chamber of Commerce here in Geneva. And I'm pleased to moderate this panel, although I don't expect it to be conflictual, but I will, let's say, animate it. Thank you, George and Monica. And now are joining us, as Marc-André said earlier, Nicole Jauvin, who's Business Development Director for the German part of Europe, which includes, of course, Switzerland to a large extent, at the foreign investment at Montreal International, and Eros Robiani, who is head of the Swiss Business Hub Canada, and is also actually a Deputy Consul General of Switzerland in Montreal. So welcome. I will be raising various questions to you, and you will share your experience and information you'd like to share. And to the audience, if you have questions that spring to your mind, please note them in the chat, and our coordinator, Marc-André, will be picking them up so that in the Q&A session, which will come around, well, in about 30 minutes, in the Q&A session, we will answer all your questions. So just to launch this, I'd like to know from your experience, what are actually the key critical success factors when establishing a business in your country? So besides, you know, of course, the formalities and everything, but in what you have seen, what are the key critical success factors? And I suggest we start with Nicole of Montreal International.
Yes, thank you. And hello, everybody. I'm very happy to be here today. And yes, I would say, first of all, as anywhere else in the world, if you want to set up business, please be ready, have your business plan ready, have your market study done, and be well prepared. And then what is very important here in Canada, and especially in Greater Montreal, where I live, surround yourself with experts to guide and advise you as from the start, because the order of actions to take to set up business is not the same as in Switzerland. For example, in Canada, you would start with the incorporation process, and the bank account is created after that. In Switzerland, as you know, it's the opposite. And opening a bank account here is a very simple procedure that takes only 48 hours. So that's very different. And then networking and the force, the power of the network is really key here. So if you're not into social media and LinkedIn and everything, you have the time to work on that a little bit. And in the meantime that you are going ahead with your plans. And what's very important as well, when it comes to hiring talent, here in Canada, companies would work mostly with the recruitment agencies and headhunters. That might be different as in Switzerland as well.
Mm-hmm. Eros, did you want to add something?
Yes, maybe I make a step back. Before establishing a subsidiary in Canada, we have most of our companies, Swiss companies, that want to come here to sell directly through distributor or through an agent. So maybe selling directly to a web page. So I think it's important that you, as Nicole mentioned, you're ready at home. Ready at home means also that you have, for example, your web page ready in English and French, that you have a one-pager ready about your product and its unique selling point. Also make sure that you have the necessary resources dedicated to this new project, to this new market. And I mean for resources, not only financial resources, for example, for marketing purpose, but also HR, staff dedicated to that. And make sure that the staff has access to the management team, if not someone from the management, so that as soon as you need to take a decision, you're ready to go and you have access to the management to do that. And also a good thing is to know your competitors in the market and to know the market, of course. But knowing that your competitors can help you really see the potential of your products and how to position it. So in my case, again, it's more about companies coming here to sell directly their products and services. And in a second phase, when they see the market, it's mature enough to make the next step to incorporate. Unless, maybe Monica will add to that, unless you need to establish a subsidiary, for example, for tax purposes, sales tax, but also income taxes.
You both mentioned the importance of networks and being visible. For example, what about a website? If you come with your website that you've prepared in Switzerland, maybe it's a certain language in German or etc. Would you say that it's important to have this prepared well in advance, even before starting to trying doing business?
But yes, if I can answer this in terms of usually your future customers or even your future partners will look at your company before you start a conversation. So it's important to have it ready before you enter this new project, this new international project. Everything must be ready, as also Nicole mentioned. So do your homework before starting thinking about going into a new market.
George, any additional comment on this?
Not really. I mean, Nika and Eros have summarized it very well. They're pros at that because they look at market entrance all the time and they know how to counsel. Now, I might perhaps add, from a general experience, personal experience point of view, that in Switzerland, there's no use to ramming through the door, if I may say. The Swiss people might in fact not necessarily appreciate such behavior. And I'm saying this because I've seen clients come in and want to be quite aggressive and move the administration and push and this and that. And this doesn't necessarily fly well with the Swiss. Switzerland is a land of, as you know, of dialogue, of good offices, of compromise, and of arrangement, not to mention of cuckoo clocks, of course, and chocolate and watches. But it's a very much the Swiss are very practical and common sense people. And if you cannot get your way or your reach your goal through the way you want it initially, there's a good chance you can maneuver differently and find another solution. There's always solutions in Switzerland. So if you cannot get through the front door, try the side door or the back door. It may work.
So thanks for that comment. So a pragmatic country that it prefers discussion and dialogue to just sort of aggressive behavior. You have mentioned both Monica and George that, of course, the numerous cantons, the numerous provinces, and then first question is, where do I set up? So I understand that from a legal point of view, in Switzerland, you set up a company, you can do business anywhere in the country. In Canada, perhaps slightly different. So how does one choose, or what would be the criteria to choose where to set up in your country? George, Switzerland?
Sure. Okay.
Zurich, Geneva, Basel, Ticino. How do you choose?
Depends if you want the sun or not. The ski, good airport hubs or not. But it's a fair question. That's a question, in fact, we get all the time when we get new incorporations. Do I incorporate in Zug? Everyone hears of Zug as a low tax, jurisdiction or canton. Do I incorporate in Zurich, in Schwyz, in other places? Now that, if I may say, so-called canton shopping used to be a big deal before the latest Swiss corporate tax reform, which came into force on 1st Jan of 2020. It is less so now because cantons have somewhat harmonized their rates. There still are differences, but there used to be huge discrepancies. There are less of these discrepancies now. And so much now that the average corporate tax rate in Switzerland is about 17.1%. If you look at the lowest one, it still is Zug, if I'm not mistaken, at 11.85. Bern is the highest at 21.04. Geneva, to give you another example, is 13.95 or virtually 14%. And Zurich is 19.7%. And there's others coming, in the middle if you look at the other cantons. But basically, what you want to do is have substance for tax purposes. If you plan to establish in Zug, but then plan to have all your operations and people and resources and staff in Geneva for tax purposes, is not going to work. The Zug authorities or Geneva authorities are going to say, well, it's all nice to want to look like you're a Zug company for tax purposes, but you're not. All your people are in Geneva, so you should really establish in Geneva. So if you are a trading firm, for instance, you need access to trade finance banks, traders, trading houses, and so on. You're probably better off in Geneva or Vaud, which is a great trading hub for such trading houses. If you want to be in the pharma industry, well, perhaps you should think of Basel. If your staff doesn't speak a word of German, perhaps you should, avoid German-speaking cantons and go for, cantons that at least speak English or French. I guess, ideally. The airport hubs can be important depending on your trade. Must you fly your people around the planet all the time? If so, you may prefer to be close to Geneva or Zurich. What else? Quality of life is one other reason to consider certain cantons. If you want to ski every weekend and have your company enjoy life and so on, perhaps you will want to elect Valais, or you may have clients or customers in the Vallée de Sion or something. If you are looking for other advantages, you may have to look at other cantons. So it has, the canton shopping has lowered with the coming in of the tax reform, but there are still reasons for which you should choose one canton or the other. But this is mostly now based on the type of industry you're active in, more than the tax angle.
Monica, in Canada?
It's going to be very similar. So our recommendation is usually to say, where is your business opportunity? Where are your clients? Where do you want to start off? And then to start very practically in that specific province, unless there are really other reasons. Where Georges had said, he gets the question, should people go to Zug? We usually get the question, what is the Delaware of Canada? Often clients hear that Delaware in the States is the place to incorporate. We don't really have that in Canada. So really our recommendation is to go where your clients are, go where the business is, and then we'll take it from there. And like Switzerland, if you do incorporate in that province, you can still use that same corporation for activities in other provinces. You may require a registration if you have another office. So for example, if you incorporate in Quebec and you have your business activities in Quebec and you realize in a few years that you'd also want to open an office in Ontario, you can do that with the same company. You'll register with the local corporate registry, and that, which is also a very simple process, and then you can do business there as well.
Monica, what about your experience at Montreal International? What would you say to this question?
Nicole, the question is for me, Nicole.
I said Nicole.
It's okay. You said Monica, but it's okay.
Oh no, sorry. I meant Nicole. Sorry.
Yes, when you look where to set up business, as George and Monica has already mentioned, so Canada is very decentralized, and so you have to look, what is your goal? Why do you want to come to Canada? Is it in order to develop the North American market, or do you have already clients here? So in that case, I would establish the company not too far for the clients, or with good access to the clients. Or maybe that you come for talent. Maybe that you don't even want to develop the market. You don't find any talent in Switzerland, and you want to do research and development activities here, or software development. Could be a very good case as well. Otherwise, if you are in fabrication and you have to produce something, you need access to raw materials. So maybe you consider to be near a logistic hub, near the railroad network, near the port. Montreal is one of the most important ports of the East Coast in North America. You would consider the time zone, of course. We have 3 different time zones here in Canada. So if you do often business to Europe, you need steady contact to the headquarters. Maybe that 9 hours to Vancouver would be a little bit difficult, but 6 hours to the East Coast would be much easier. Then if you look into affordable and clean energy, for instance, here in the province of Quebec, we have the lowest electricity costs in whole North America, and 99% come from renewable sources. So if that's something interesting for the company, something to consider, of course. Then otherwise, for when it comes to hiring talent internationally, you have to think of the families and of the cost of living. Childcare is very expensive in the rest of Canada. Here in Quebec, for instance, we have a public childcare system, which is very affordable. So the taxes are higher here, but at the end of the month, you have still more money in your pocket, because the cost of living is really lower here. My 2 cents.
Thank you. Would anyone like to add something?
Maybe just recently we had contact with a Swiss company on the IT sector, and they wanted to establish a subsidiary or a kind of a branch in Vancouver because of the project Chasing the Sun, because they were giving round-the-clock customer service to their customer in Europe. And so having a team in Vancouver, 9 hours difference time zone, could allow them to work during the day and cover the night in Europe for their customers. So it's also a possibility to use the time difference to your advantage.
Very interesting. Let me come back to the distribution of products. Let's say you are in an earlier stage and don't want to set up immediately a company, but are considering selling your services or products in the other country. I'd like to hear more about the distribution or agency agreements. We also talk about partnerships. So you've talked about the legal framework. What about in practice? For example, is it more common to have agency agreements? Is it more common to have simple distributorships or franchises? What have you observed?
Shall I start, or George, do you want to start?
Yes.
Go ahead, sure.
Go ahead.
So we see both. And the question will also depend on what kind of control you wish to exercise over the process and the contact that you wish to have to the end customer. So in the agency agreement, you'll have somebody who'll be representing you to market your company and your services and your products, and then who will try to get new customers, which you will ultimately approve or reject, mostly approve, and then deal directly with them. So this gives you a direct link with the customers, and so therefore more control about the whole process. And should there be an issue with the agent, you still have that link with your end customers because you've already established that relationship, you have the contacts, etc. So that's one distinction. But however, for certain industries, we see that for certain, for example, we have a client in agricultural machinery, and we see that there is a network of distributors and distribution network in Canada where certain dealers will be selling and reselling this machinery. So in that industry, and for this particular type of machinery, that seems to be then more adequate and more appropriate for this, for them. So that's one measure of a difference. Also, practically, what we see is a question of who to work with and how to know whether it's agent or distributor. How do you know if that's the right person or the right company to work with? And this can be a challenge because, as I'd mentioned earlier, for example, the minimum capital is not public and not much else is public either. So if you go on the corporate registry, you can see the name, you can see the address, you can see the directors, in certain provinces, the shareholders or the top 3 shareholders, but not much more. So as a Swiss company coming in, whether directly or with your subsidiary, you're not quite sure who your business partners are. So our recommendation is always to do a due diligence. Is it a personal recommendation? Have you worked with them before? If you're going to go into a long-term relationship, to have other ways of finding out their background, their reputation, and then to also safeguard certain things, to make sure that your payment processes are such that you're protected. You're not putting too much at risk when you're working with a partner whom you don't know very, very well yet. And another recommendation that we have in this context is often that if a partner comes in and wants to work with you, they're often, hopefully, very enthusiastic about the project and your products. And then they may wish to, seeing the business opportunity that they have, they may wish to represent you for all of Canada. And so territory becomes really a key question in both agency and distribution contracts, where sometimes we see that clients will be approached by somebody who wants to represent them for all the provinces, whereas not just legally, but also from a marketing perspective, from a market perspective, different provinces just represent a different market. There are language questions, there's a different way of communicating and of approaching clients, whether they're in BC or in the prairies, Atlantic provinces, Quebec, Ontario. So that's also something to keep in mind, that you can very well divide up the Canadian market in smaller markets and work with different people and organizations depending on those markets. Some of the key points that we discuss with our clients when drafting these agreements.
Thanks.
And if I may add, coming back to your question on agency and distribution, you also spoke of partnerships. Partnerships you rarely encounter in cross-border trade between, I guess, any country. I mean, normal general partnerships or similar partnerships. Of course, partnerships in the wider sense, in the sense of JVs and investment in companies, of course, you see. But partnerships as such, you rarely encounter. Now, the number you said, are there more distribution than agency agreements? That I would not be able to reply to. It's a good question. I'm not sure if Iras or Nicole would know. I wouldn't have the answer to that, but I'll say this. As regards Switzerland, there's 3 takeaways, I guess, you should have in mind when it comes to time for agency arrangements. One, I would call the non-compete remuneration thing. If you appoint a commercial agent and wish that commercial agent not to compete against you or at least your trade after the end of the agreement, you're likely to have to compensate, to remunerate the agent for that non-compete, as you do, in fact, very often when you want to buy someone from not competing as an employee once he or she leaves. So that's one thing. The second thing is there is that so-called goodwill indemnity under Swiss law. If the agency contract is governed by Swiss law and the agent has greatly contributed to expanding the network of the principal, and the agency relationship, ends for whatever reason, except if it ends for cause, because the principal has a right to dismiss the agent if it doesn't end for cause. And the agency relationship terminates. If the principal keeps on benefiting from the great work the agent has done during the relationship, he may very well have, the principal may very well have to pay to compensate the agent for that, for that goodwill, if I may say. And I'll just read you the paragraph in that Swiss civil code. It reads as follows: the amount of such claim, which the agent can claim then, must not exceed the agent's net annual earnings from the agency. When I say net, it's revenues less expenses. So whatever costs the agent has incurred, calculated as the average for the last 5 years of the relationship, or if such relationship was shorter, the average over the entire duration of the contract. Let's say it's 3 years. You look at 3 years, you make the average, and pay the amount the net amount which the agent would have received in a particular year. There's a third thing. Also, I would refer to this as the permanent establishment trap. It's not the right expression, but Canadians should be aware when they appoint an agent in this country, that it may or may not be a problem tax-wise, because there is this double tax treaty between the two countries. So, tax-wise, it shouldn't be a big deal. But in some cases, Canadians do not want to be seen as having a permanent establishment in this country. If they want to do that, if they want to achieve that, they got to make sure they orchestrate things properly so that having an agent which would have the authority to conclude contracts on their behalf does not lead to that permanent establishment, principle. And so that's, in fact, I refer to the DTT between Canada and Switzerland, and I can read you Article 5, for instance. It says...
Perhaps, Georges? Yeah. I think we're getting a bit short of time to read articles, I'm afraid. But I think you've made these points very well, that there should be caution exercised with the agency, both in terms of potential indemnities when your project evolves, or when you, as well as the fiscal aspect.
Yes.
Yeah. I'm sorry, I've interrupted you in your flow to...
Oh, that was my third point, really. There's 3 points, and there was a third one. I was referring to that, permanent establishment risk, potential issue. Not the end of the world, because there's a DTT between the countries, but...
The double tax treaty for avoidance of double taxation, which would take care of this risk. So I think this highlights the need to be well advised and have a clear sense of your strategy. Yes. When you set up. As time is running, I'm afraid I need to cut you on this because I'd very much like to allow Eros and Nicole to present their organization and what services you provide to investors and people interested in investing or in the other country's market. Eros, you want to start telling us what is the Swiss Business Hub and what you can do for
Thank you.
members?
I'll try to keep it short. So the Swiss Business Hub Canada is an antenna of Switzerland Global Enterprise, or SGE, as we call it, which is the official Swiss organization for export and investment promotion, with offices in Switzerland and in 31 countries. What's interesting about how SGE is organized is that SGE is not a governmental office, it's a private association, a non-profit organization, which has more than 2,000 members, and the members are SMEs in Switzerland. So yes, SG is funded by the Swiss government, but through this organization remain independent, agile, and also much focused on its mission, which is to support Swiss SMEs in their international business and also help innovative foreign companies to establish in Switzerland. So because SG is a partnership with the Federal Department of Foreign Affairs, the equivalent of Global Affairs for Canada, SG has established 23 Swiss business hubs and 7 trade points around the world, covering directly 31 countries, as I said. So that's the reason why Swiss business hubs are always integrated in Swiss embassies and consulates and are therefore part of the official Swiss diplomatic network. So the goal of the Swiss Business Hub is to provide Swiss SMEs with information, services, and contacts for their entire internationalization process. At the same time, we target innovative foreign companies, in my case, of course, Canadian companies, and provide them with the same level of information, services, and contacts in Switzerland. In terms of services, we offer almost everything an SME needs in its international business. But since we are a very small team, we rely on our network of external experts for our mandates, and say their number and expertise upon which our customers can rely on make us a strategic success partner for our customers. By the way, among this network of experts and partners, we can count also on institutional partners like the Swiss Canadian Chamber of Commerce and Montreal International, who are part of this event today. So that's in a nutshell who we are.
Nicole, would you like to present Montreal International and what you can do for investors?
Yeah, so Montreal International is the economic development agency of the Greater Montreal region, and we are mandated by the 3 levels of the government. So federal government, province of Quebec, and the 82 municipalities presenting the Greater Montreal region. And the last 20% are coming from the private sector. And so we're mandated to attract foreign companies to set up business in Greater Montreal and to help them with their reinvestment projects as well. So basically, we're like a one-stop shop, actually, for foreign companies setting up business here. We will provide them our whole network, what they need to set up business. So law firms, banks, fiscalists, and everything they would need. We would guide them strategically as well, like the 10 key steps where to start. So we start with incorporation, afterwards the bank account, afterwards the recruitment, etc., etc. And of course, we can also identify with the companies for which financial aid programs they could qualify according to their activities and according to the a number of creation of jobs in Canada, not in Canada, in Greater Montreal, sorry. Yeah, and then otherwise we have immigration lawyers in our offices who could help with the work permits for the talent to hire abroad, or if somebody from the headquarters is going to come over for 1 or 2 years with the family to set up everything from the start, so we can help with this. Otherwise, we have another team as well, talent attraction. So we're doing recruitment missions to sectorial trade shows all over the world with the companies which want to hire abroad. So we will promote Montreal, the quality of life with our services, and the company is going to make publicity for itself. And so we really like long-term partners. We don't attract the companies and say bye-bye. No, we're going to stay with them. We are in contact here with a lot of big companies that are here for years. For just to name a few Swiss companies, ABB is here, Sita is here, Sika is here. So a lot of companies that you already know. And yes, so we stay around and stick around and want them to grow and to flourish, and we want them to be well.
Thank you. That's quite an impressive panel of services you offer, as well as.
And I forgot again. Sorry.
Yeah.
I forget it every time. Our services are free. Exactly. Very
impressive. Thank you so much. Marc-André, I think with as time is running, I suggest we open now the floor to any questions, and then if not, I can raise a few other points that we wanted to. Perhaps you want to unmute everyone and just let anyone.
We had one question in the chat from Mr. Scott, but I think he actually left the meeting. So I don't know, is it like, would you like me to read the question?
Yes.
Okay, so it was mentioned that there was equity limits in Swiss, but not Canada. Could this be taken up in a bit more detail? Why is it a disadvantage as it was mentioned by Mr. Racine? Thanks.
Did you say why is it a disadvantage?
Yep.
Well, when I say equity limits, I mean the share capital of a company must be limited in the case of a Swiss company, whatever the amount. That doesn't mean it cannot be very high. You can set it at whatever amount you want. I guess the disadvantage is that every time you want to increase the capital, you need to increase it, as opposed to having an unlimited capital right from the start, which is more flexible. That's the only difference. So I guess from that point of view, it's slightly more flexible, the way it's done in Canada, capital-wise. But that may change again with the company law reform that's ongoing.
So not a big problem.
No, it's not a problem. It's just more of a hassle every time you want to increase the capital.
And that was it for the chat.
Anyone, I think, in the audience can just raise their hands and raise a question.
We must unmute them.
Are they unmuted?
I think they can unmute themselves. Yeah.
As people are figuring out the unmute button, I'd like to ask Eros something, because public procurement and also private offers some interesting opportunities, selling services or products to government agencies. Yep. In both countries. So I believe the Swiss Business Hub recently published a document that summarizes the rules for any company interested. Can you tell us more about this document, what's in it, and how do we access it if someone is interested?
Yeah, with pleasure. Yeah. By the way, the document is free to download. You just go to the website s-ge.com and use the search function like public tenders or private tenders, and you will find the document free to download. And we have also published many other useful documents, like the one on e-commerce in Canada, on water and wastewater management. And in the next days, we're going to publish a large document on the healthcare sector in Canada. But back to the tenders, the key element that we have established in this document is that even with the free trade agreement in place, a company registered only in Switzerland will have a very low probability of winning a tender here in Canada. That's because Canada has excluded provinces and cities from the coverage of the World Trade Organization Agreement on Government Procurement. Long name. That means that bidding through a company registered in Canada, subsidiary, a representative office, a local partner, will significantly increase the credibility of the offer and the potential for success. Another thing we have seen on private tenders, that they are mainly issued by large companies in the country who want to ensure that they have a rigorous procurement process in order to obtain quality services at the right price. And therefore, to be invited in this in these private tenders, you need to establish or activate a business development here in Canada. With public organization, it's always preferable to start with a contract. It's called by mutual agreement on invitation before deploying your business relationship via open tenders. That's 3 key elements that we have found on this document that is free to be downloaded on the sg.com website.
Wonderful. Excellent. I see that Jean Ricli has raised his hand.
Hi, everyone. You can all hear me?
Yes.
So this is maybe more of a general questions to you panelists, and I know we all have a link to Montreal. And I'm not giving my age here, but I know Montreal benefited from a very well positioned as the gateway to North America. With its culture, with its language, meaning that it was easier for European companies to establish themselves in this area and in Quebec. And I'd just like to have each one of you give a point of view, if that's still true, and you know what needs to be defined if we're not still the leader in that case. Thank you.
I don't know who wants to start.
Yeah, of course, I can start, of course, if you like. Of course, yes, when you come here to Montreal, you can have market access to whole North America with CASMA, with was formerly NAFTA, of course. And then why we call us like the gateway to North America is because the culture is really in between Europe and the USA. I think that's the main point.
If I may add something, I think we spoke about this, Jean, in the past. The problem we have seen, or the challenge we have seen, is that we are dealing the Swiss Business Hub with small and medium enterprises. They have really not that many resources to cover several markets at the time. And usually we were selling Canada as a gateway to the North American market, but we have seen that when a company wants to go abroad, in this case to North America, and they will spare resources to do that, they want to go for the market that offers the biggest return on investment, the biggest opportunity. And they are convinced the Canadian market is not that big. The country is huge, but the Canadian market is not that big compared to the US. And so we've been struggling with selling Canada as a gateway to North America. On the other end, we have used a couple of times what you, Nicole, have said, that once you have established your company in Canada, you have a couple of customers here and well established, and you can use also the Canadian resources, in this case, Montreal International, but also other agency to help you with programs and become a Canadian exporter to Canada, to the US market. But again, it's difficult for me to say that it's a gateway to North America because we are working with really small and medium enterprises, and they are not willing to invest at the same time in 2 different markets. They want to go with one market, and unfortunately, the US offers the biggest opportunities. That's a fact.
Yeah. Another thing that I could add is that the province of Quebec has a very advantageous export support program in place in order to help companies to market their products and services outside Quebec, actually. So outside Quebec means in the rest of Canada or in the US, wherever. So as being said, it's a very advantageous program. It goes from the development of a marketing strategy, including market research, over the participation at trade shows outside Quebec, to the recruitment of an agent or a distributor. So that's something very interesting in order to help leverage the respective commercial roadmap.
Maybe the last thing, from what I heard from my colleagues in the US, the Swiss Business Hub US, which is our largest Swiss Business Hub in the world in terms of distribution of the resources, they told me it's very rare that a Swiss company, especially SMEs, tackle the whole market, the whole US market at one time. Usually they want to go they go into one single region. Could be New York and the East, or could be California. Nowadays, apparently also Texas is a very interesting market, but they don't just put all the resources covering the whole market. They go into one single region. Therefore, it could be also beneficial for them to understand that Canada can be seen, especially the two regions here, Toronto and Montreal, like the equivalent of entering the US market at the very beginning, because you don't go to the US and cover the whole country at once, unless you are a very, very large company.
So I think it would be time for us to say goodbye today, because it's 1:07 here.
Yeah.
So on that note, guys, once again, I want to thank you all for taking part in this event today. I would also like to thank our panel of guests, Monica, Nicole, Eros, George, and also Miss Anne Kostecki, I'm sorry, for such an interesting conversation. I look forward to seeing many of you at our next event, and have a wonderful day, everyone.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Merci.
Wow.
Merci, au revoir.
Au revoir.
Au revoir tout le monde.
Au revoir.
Merci beaucoup. Merci.
Au revoir.